Ah, the Yakuza. When you think of them, you probably picture something straight out of a Takeshi Kitano film, stoic men in sharp suits, missing a pinky finger, covered in elaborate dragon tattoos, and engaging in tastefully choreographed yet brutal street violence. For decades, they were Japan's most visible, most romanticized, and frankly, most terrifying criminal organizations. They ran everything from gambling dens to construction sites, and they did it all out in the open, with headquarters listed in the phone book. Yes, the phone book. It was the equivalent of the Sinaloa cartel having a Yelp page. 5 stars, excellent service, slightly intimidating about late payments. But here's the thing. That version of the Yakuza is, for the most part, a ghost. They're still here, lurking in the shadows of Japanese society, but the game has changed dramatically. They're no longer the flamboyant gangsters of yesteryear. The Japanese government, after decades of turning a blind eye, finally decided to act. Not with a massive Hollywood-style crackdown involving shootouts and dramatic arrests, but with something far more insidious and, dare I say, far more Japanese paperwork. An avalanche of bureaucratic regulations designed to make life as a gangster utterly, soul-crushingly inconvenient. So, no, Japan didn't exactly defeat the Yakuza in a blaze of glory. It's more like they slowly, methodically squeezed the life out of them. They were put on a strict diet of social and economic exclusion, leaving behind a leaner, older, and surprisingly more strategic underworld. The Yakuza of today are less about street brawls and more about navigating spreadsheets. They've traded their katanas for calculators, which, while less cinematic, is arguably much, much scarier. Because a gangster you can see is one thing, but a gangster who looks like your accountant, that's a whole new level of terrifying. The fundamental structure of the Yakuza has always been its greatest strength. It's a pyramid scheme, but with more honor and slightly more dismemberment. At the very top you have the Oyabun, the father figure. He's the Don, the big boss, the guy whose word is law and whose tea must always be the perfect temperature. He doesn't just command loyalty, he receives it as a birthright from his members, who see him as the patriarch of their dysfunctional, crime-ridden family. It's a deeply feudal relationship built on a rigid code of conduct, which is a very polite way of saying, don't you dare cross him. Directly beneath the Oyabun is the Wakagashira, or First Lieutenant. This is the number 2, the executive officer who handles the day-to-day running of the syndicate's criminal enterprises. Think of him as the COO of Crime, Inc. He's the one cracking the whip, managing the turf, and making sure the money flows upwards. He's also, not coincidentally, the heir apparent, which makes his relationship with the boss a delightful mix of subservience and the constant, simmering ambition of a man who knows he's one unfortunate accident away from the top job. It's like a Shakespearean tragedy, but with more pachinko parlors. Then you have the Shate Gashira, who is in charge of the younger brothers, or the Shate. While the Wakagashira manages the direct line of succession, the Shatigashira oversees the other underbosses and their crews. These are the middle managers of the mob, each responsible for their own little fiefdom of illicit activity. It's a complex web of loyalties and hierarchies, all designed to insulate the Oyabun at the top. If a lower-ranking member gets caught, the chain of command is supposed to stop well before it reaches the penthouse suite. Below them all are the foot soldiers, the rank-and-file members. These are the guys on the street, the ones shaking down businesses, collecting debts, and generally doing the dirty work that keeps the whole enterprise afloat. In the past, this was a massive army. Today, not so much. The glory days of massive syndicates like the Yamaguchi-gumi, the Sumiyoshi-kai, and the Inagawa-kai are long gone. Their numbers have plummeted from over 180,000 in the 1960s to less than 25,000 today. That's a catastrophic drop. And what happens when a massive criminal organization starts to shrink? The same thing that happens when any company downsizes. Vicious infighting. The once mighty Yamaguchi-gumi, Japan's largest syndicate, has fractured multiple times in the last decade. Splinter groups like the Kobe Yamaguchi-gumi and the Ikeda-gumi have broken away, leading to turf wars and a level of internal strife that makes the final season of Game of Thrones look like a peaceful transfer of power. They're fighting over a smaller and smaller piece of the pie. This downsizing has fundamentally changed the nature of the family. The Oyabun is no longer just a fearsome warlord. He's also a CEO trying to stop his company from going bankrupt. He has to manage declining revenues, an aging workforce, and a complete lack of new talent. It's less The Godfather and more The Office, if Michael Scott occasionally had to order a hit on the guy from accounting. The structure is the same, but the scale is vastly, almost comically, diminished. The family dynamic, once a powerful recruitment tool, is now a liability. The promise of brotherhood and belonging doesn't mean much when your brothers are all collecting pensions and the family business is on the verge of collapse. The strict hierarchy remains, a relic of a bygone era, but it now governs a much smaller, much older, and much more anxious kingdom. It's a rigid skeleton from a once mighty beast now rattling around in a skin that's several sizes too big. The result is a Yakuza that is paradoxically both weaker and more unpredictable. With fewer members and less money, they're more desperate. The old codes of honor, which supposedly prevented harm to civilians, are fraying at the edges. When you're fighting for survival, honor is a luxury you can't afford. The family is still a family, yes, but it's one that's getting smaller, older, and meaner with every passing year. So, you want to join the Yakuza? First of all, terrible career choice. The benefits are awful, the retirement plan is basically a shallow grave, and your boss might literally ask for a pound of flesh. But if you were hypothetically to join, you'd have to go through the Sakazuki ceremony. This is the core initiation ritual, a deeply symbolic act that formalizes the Oyabun Koban or father-son relationship. It's a surprisingly formal, almost serene affair, steeped in Shinto tradition. There are no blood oaths or anything so gauche. This is Japan, after all. The ceremony involves the Oyabun and the new recruit, the Koban, sitting opposite each other as sake is prepared. The sake is mixed with salt and fish scales, representing the bounty of the land and sea, and then poured into a special cup. The Oyabun drinks from the cup, then passes it to the Koban, who drinks the rest. The amount of sake each person drinks signifies their status. The Oyabun's cup is filled to the brim, symbolizing his authority, while the Kobun receives a smaller share, symbolizing his subservience. By sharing the cup, they become family. It's a bond considered more binding than blood. Of course, the most famous Yakuza ritual isn't a ritual at all, but a fashion statement, the full-body tattoo or irizumi. These aren't your cousin's regrettable butterfly tattoo. We're talking about massive, intricate masterpieces of traditional Japanese art, covering the entire body from the neck down to the wrists and ankles. Dragons, koi fish, samurai warriors. Each symbol carries a deep meaning, telling the story of the wearer's life and allegiance. The process itself is an ordeal done with traditional bamboo tools in a method called tebori, which is incredibly painful and can take hundreds of hours to complete. It was a mark of commitment, a permanent declaration that you had left civilian life behind. But here's the problem with having a giant, unmissable "I'm a gangster" sign tattooed all over your body. It makes it very easy for the police to identify you. As government crackdowns intensified, these tattoos became a massive liability. Public bathhouses, swimming pools, and even some beaches in Japan ban anyone with large tattoos, specifically to keep the Yakuza out. So while irizumi is still respected within the organization, it's become a dying art. Younger members, if they get tattoos at all, opt for smaller, more concealable pieces. The full bodysuit is now the domain of the old guard, a walking museum of a tradition that has become too dangerous to uphold. And what about the most infamous tradition of all, yubitsume? The act of cutting off one's own pinky finger as a sign of apology. You messed up, you dishonored the family, So you wrap your finger in a cloth, place it on a clean surface and slice off the top joint with a sharp blade. You then present the severed digit to your oyabun as a token of your profound remorse. The logic was that a man with a missing finger couldn't grip a sword properly, making him more reliant on the group for protection. It's a brutal, visceral act of penance. But like the tattoos, yubitsume has become increasingly rare. For one, it's another dead giveaway to the police. A man missing a pinky joint in Japan might as well be wearing a name tag that says, "Hello, my name is Kenji and I have made poor life choices." Secondly, modern Yakuza are trying to present a more corporate, less barbaric image. Chopping off body parts is, to put it mildly, bad for public relations. These days, a hefty cash payment is a far more common form of apology. The act of yubitsume is now mostly symbolic, a threat whispered but seldom carried out. The decline of these traditions speaks volumes about the modern Yakuza. The Sakazuki ceremony, the one true ritual, endures because it's private and binding. It reinforces the core family structure that the organization needs to survive. But the external markers, the tattoos and the severed fingers, have been shed like an old skin. They were symbols of power in an era when being a visible gangster was a source of pride and fear. Now, in an age of surveillance and social exclusion, visibility is a death sentence. The Yakuza have been forced to abandon the very things that once defined their public image. They've had to sacrifice their culture to preserve their criminal enterprise. The traditions that remain are the ones that happen behind closed doors, reinforcing the bonds of a family that is now forced to live entirely in the shadows. The old-school Yakuza revenue stream was a greatest hits of classic organized crime. We're talking protection rackets, illegal gambling, loan sharking, and prostitution. It was hands-on, violent, and very, very conspicuous. If you owned a bar in Kabukicho in the 80s, you didn't wonder if you were going to get a visit from the local Yakuza. You wondered which day of the week they'd come to collect their security fee. It was a simple, brutal business model. But that model is dead. Street-level crime is messy, it attracts police attention, and frankly, the profit margins aren't what they used to be. Why risk a lengthy prison sentence shaking down a noodle stand for a few thousand yen when you can make millions in the stock market? The modern Yakuza has gone corporate. Their primary business is no longer crime, but what the police call boryokudan, which roughly translates to violent groups. Their real money now comes from sophisticated, white-collar, and deliberately boring financial crimes. Think about it. What's harder for police to trace, a back-alley brawl over turf, or a complex case of securities fraud involving shell corporations and offshore accounts? The Yakuza have become experts in exploiting the grey areas of the Japanese economy. They engage in stock market manipulation, real estate fraud, and corporate blackmail. They set up legitimate-looking front companies, construction firms, consulting agencies, waste management services, and use them to launder money, secure public contracts, and extort legitimate businesses. One of their favorite tactics is something called sokaya. This is a uniquely Japanese form of racketeering. The Yakuza buy a small number of shares in a major corporation, which gives them the legal right to attend shareholder meetings. They then threaten to show up and disrupt the meeting by revealing embarrassing secrets about the company's executives, infidelities, shady deals, you name it. To avoid the public humiliation, the company pays them a handsome consulting fee to stay quiet and stay away. It's blackmail, but with a quarterly earnings report. The key to this new business model is insulation. The Oyabun and his top lieutenants never get their hands dirty. They operate through a complex network of intermediaries and frontmen. They use civilians, lawyers, accountants, real estate agents, who may or may not be aware of who they're truly working for. These are the Kigyo Shate, or corporate affiliates. They provide a crucial layer of deniability, allowing the Yakuza to profit from illegal activities while maintaining a plausible distance. If the scheme implodes, it's the civilian affiliate who takes the fall, not the made man. This shift has also led them into some surprisingly modern ventures. They've been linked to cybercrime, including phishing scams and online fraud. They've even dabbled in cryptocurrency, which is a money launderer's dream come true. It's anonymous, unregulated, and incredibly difficult to trace. Imagine a 70-year-old Yakuza boss covered in tattoos, trying to explain Bitcoin to his underlings. It's a bizarre image, but it's the reality of 21st century organized crime in Japan. The beauty of this approach from the Yakuza's perspective is that it's boring. Financial statements, corporate filings, and stock portfolios don't make for exciting headlines. The police are still geared up to fight street crime, but they're often outmatched when it comes to following a complex paper trail through multiple shell companies. It's a quiet, insidious form of crime that hides in plain sight, buried under mountains of legitimate-looking paperwork. So while the Yakuza's public image is still one of violent street thugs, their actual business portfolio looks more like that of a shady hedge fund. They've traded the sword for the spreadsheet, the fist for the fountain pen. It's less profitable than their glory days and certainly less glamorous, but it's a business model designed for one thing: survival in an era where being seen is the biggest crime of all. For most of the 20th century, the Japanese government and the Yakuza had a sort of unspoken agreement. The Yakuza kept street crime in check, and the police, in turn, mostly left them alone. They were a known quantity, a necessary evil that maintained a brutal kind of order. But by the early 1990s, public patience had worn thin. The Yakuza had become too powerful, too brazen, and their involvement in the bubble economy had crossed a line. So the government finally decided to act. Their weapon of choice wasn't a bigger gun, it was a better written law. In 1992, they passed the first Anti-Boryokudan Act. This law didn't make being a Yakuza member illegal. That would violate freedom of association. Instead, it designated the major syndicates as specified violent groups and outlawed specific gangster-like activities, such as extorting businesses for protection money. It was the first major step in a long, slow campaign of legislative strangulation. But the real masterstroke came in 2011 with the nationwide implementation of the Yakuza exclusion ordinances. These weren't criminal laws, but civil ones, and they were devastatingly effective. The ordinances made it illegal for any legitimate business or individual to knowingly do business with a Yakuza member. Suddenly, a gangster couldn't open a bank account. He couldn't get a cell phone contract. He couldn't rent an apartment, buy a car, or even get insurance. The laws essentially made it impossible to participate in modern society. Think about the profound impact of that. You are effectively erased from the economy. Your life becomes a nightmare of logistical hurdles. Need to pay a bill? Can't use a bank transfer? Need to call your underling? You'd better hope you can find a payphone, which is about as easy as finding a unicorn in downtown Tokyo. The laws even extend to their families. The child of a Yakuza member might be barred from opening a school lunch account. It's a form of collective punishment designed to make membership so socially and economically toxic that no one would want to join. It's death by 1,000 paper cuts. The government didn't need to kick down doors. They just needed to make it impossible for Yakuza to sign a lease. They weaponized bureaucracy. Every form you have to fill out in Japan, from a gym membership to a golf club application, now includes a little box you have to check, swearing that you are not a member of an anti-social force. For a Yakuza member, every piece of paper is a potential landmine. This has had a chilling effect on recruitment. Why would any young person sign up for a life where they are legally barred from the basic functions of society? The promise of fast money and brotherhood rings hollow when you can't even rent a car to go on a weekend trip. It's a key reason why the average age of a Yakuza member is now over 50. They are, quite literally, a dying breed, and the government's paperwork is hastening their demise. The police have also become much more proactive. They conduct raids, make arrests for minor infractions, and engage in a campaign of constant harassment. They'll pull over a Yakuza boss's luxury car for a routine inspection just to inconvenience him. They'll stand outside syndicate headquarters with cameras documenting everyone who comes and goes. The goal isn't always to make an arrest, it's to make their lives as difficult and unpleasant as possible. This legislative and social squeeze has been far more effective than any gun battle. The Yakuza thrived for a century in a grey area of Japanese law and society. By systematically eliminating that grey area, by turning the rules of civil society into a weapon, the government has backed them into a corner. They haven't been defeated in a climactic battle. They're being slowly and methodically erased by the very society they once terrorized. To understand the Yakuza's strange place in Japan, you have to look back at their history. In the chaos of post-World War II Japan, the Yakuza stepped into a power vacuum. With the police force in disarray, they became the unofficial regulators of the black markets, settling disputes and maintaining a semblance of order, their order, but order nonetheless. They were seen by some as a roguish but necessary part of the social fabric. This is the root of their bizarrely romanticized image as chivalrous gangsters. This role continued for decades. In many neighborhoods, the local Yakuza syndicate was more effective at keeping out petty criminals than the actual police. They had a vested interest in keeping their turf clean for their own businesses. If you had a problem with a rowdy drunk or a street thief, you might have better luck talking to the local crime boss than filing a police report. It was a deeply flawed and dangerous system, but for a long time, it was a system that many people tacitly accepted. Their most famous and most cynically brilliant public relations move has been their involvement in disaster relief. After the 1995 Kobe earthquake, the Yamaguchi-gumi were among the first responders on the scene. They organized truckloads of food, water and blankets and delivered them to victims far more efficiently than the slow-moving government bureaucracy. They did it again after the 2011 tsunami, providing aid and shelter. It was a masterclass in reputation laundering. For a brief moment, they weren't criminals, they were heroes. Of course, this wasn't purely altruistic. It was a way to curry public favor and remind everyone of their supposed chivalrous roots. It was also a way to get a foothold in the lucrative post-disaster reconstruction contracts. We're so glad you're safe. By the way, our construction company happens to have an opening for a multi-billion yen rebuilding project. What a coincidence. It's the ultimate long game, save a village, then own it for the next 50 years. Today, that public influence has almost completely evaporated. The exclusion ordinances have made any association with them toxic. No politician or business leader would dare be seen with a Yakuza member. The idea of them as unofficial regulators is a joke. They no longer control the streets in any meaningful way. Their power has receded from the public square into the corporate backroom. However, a shadow of their former reputation persists, especially among older generations. Some still see them through a nostalgic lens, as a remnant of a more honorable, albeit more violent time. They remember when the Yakuza had a code, when they supposedly didn't harm civilians, katsugi. This is, of course, a heavily romanticized myth, but it's a myth that has proven remarkably durable in Japanese pop culture, in films, manga, and video games. The Yakuza's influence is now more cultural than actual. They are a boogeyman, a cautionary tale, and a source of endless fascination. The fear they inspire is no longer the immediate physical fear of a shakedown, but a more abstract fear of the darkness lurking beneath Japan's orderly surface. They represent a chaotic, feudal past that stands in stark contrast to Japan's modern, hyper-organized present. So, while they no longer patrol the streets, their ghosts still do. Their legacy is embedded in the national psyche. They are a symbol of a part of Japanese identity that is violent, tribal, and resistant to authority. Their actual influence on day-to-day society is minimal, but their influence on the Japanese imagination remains potent. They are smaller, yes, but they are still there, a lingering presence that refuses to be completely erased. For all the government crackdowns and legislative pressure, the single greatest threat to the Yakuza's existence is something far more mundane: demographics. Japan is the oldest country in the world. with a rapidly aging population and a shrinking birth rate. And the Yakuza are aging even faster than the general public. The average age of a member is now well over 50. Many syndicates are top-heavy with bosses in their 60s, 70s, and even 80s. This isn't just a fun fact. It's an existential crisis. An organized crime syndicate cannot function as a retirement home. You need young, ambitious, and frankly reckless individuals to serve as foot soldiers, to take risks, and to enforce the syndicate's will. But young people in Japan today are simply not interested. The promise of the Yakuza life, brotherhood, money, power, has lost all its appeal. Why would it appeal to them? Think about it from the perspective of a 20-year-old in Japan. You could join the Yakuza, swear a lifetime oath of loyalty to an old man, get a painful tattoo you have to hide forever, cut off your own finger if you mess up, and be barred from getting a cell phone or an apartment. Or you could get a normal job. Or even more likely, you could join a different kind of gang, a hangure group. Hangure are the new face of organized crime in Japan. They are semi-organized street gangs, looser and more fluid than the rigid Yakuza. They have no formal hierarchy, no initiation rituals, and no code of honor. They are young, tech-savvy, and opportunistic. They commit scams, robberies, and fraud, often organized through social media, and then disperse. They are everything the Yakuza are not: modern, flexible, and anonymous. For a disillusioned youth looking to make a quick buck, the hangure are a far more attractive option. The Yakuza's rigid, feudal structure, once its greatest strength, is now its biggest weakness. It's an analog organization in a digital world. The concept of lifelong loyalty to a patriarch feels hopelessly outdated to a generation raised on the internet. The Yakuza are trying to sell a vision of feudal honor to kids who communicate in memes and aspire to be YouTubers. It's an impossible sales pitch. The result is a geriatric underworld. You have stories of elderly Yakuza bosses being arrested for shoplifting food because their syndicates can no longer support them. You have police reports detailing turf wars fought between gangs of pensioners. It would be comical if it weren't so pathetic. The fearsome criminal empire has been reduced to a squabbling bunch of old men, fighting over the scraps of a world that has left them behind. This aging problem is compounded by the fact that the old guard is dying off, and there is no one to replace them. When a powerful Oyabun dies of old age, it often creates a power vacuum that his aging lieutenants are too weak or too few to fill. Entire branches of syndicates are simply fading away, not with a bang, but with the quiet whimper of a life insurance policy finally paying out. The police haven't defeated the Yakuza. The government hasn't defeated the Yakuza. Time is defeating the Yakuza. They are being rendered obsolete by social and technological change. They are a relic, a living fossil from another era. And while they still possess the capacity for violence and crime, their biggest battle is one they can never win: the relentless, unforgiving march of the clock. So where does that leave Japan's most notorious gangsters? The Yakuza of today are a shadow of their former selves. They are smaller, with their membership numbers in freefall. They are less violent, having traded street brawls for shareholder meetings. They are less visible, forced to shed the tattoos and traditions that once defined them, and they are more corporate, running their operations like a shady hedge fund, struggling to stay solvent in a hostile market. It's tempting to write them off as a spent force, a relic destined for the history books, but that would be a mistake. The Yakuza have not been eradicated. The core structure, the Oyabun-Kobun relationship that has defined them for centuries, remains intact. They have simply done what every successful organism does when faced with a hostile environment. They've adapted. They've gone underground, burrowing deep into the foundations of the economy, operating in ways that are harder to see, harder to prosecute, and in some ways, harder to fight. They've become quieter, smarter, and more insidious. The flashy, violent gangster is a dying breed, replaced by a new kind of criminal who is fluent in the language of contracts, shell corporations, and cryptocurrency. The Yakuza have proven themselves to be survivors, masters of reinvention. They may be fading from public view, but to assume they are gone is to underestimate their capacity for change. They haven't vanished, they've adapted, and that's what makes them fascinating.